So through all this now, as we've kind of talked about those, Owen utilized the Charting the Life tools to really transition and think about what did he want to do for his next step. And he found that in school, through going through these forms and diving into them more, that there was a welding certification program that he could take while still in high school. So we're going to talk about how he mapped his goals, identified those supports, and we planned for those next steps. And how, as he hit some of those barriers, how he was able to overcome them. So this is the life trajectory worksheet that Owen started filling out. And like I said, it wasn't something that was done in one sitting. For him, it was really that struggle in what he wanted for his good life. So as he was taking classes as a freshman and starting to explore those things, and we did complete assessments to really kind of pull out some of the things he enjoyed, because he struggled to really kind of put a finger on that, because he had a lot of things that he was interested in, but nothing that he felt could be a career. In the beginning, I think he'd even talked about gaming and maybe being a gamer. But the more he looked into that, it was overwhelming. And that's what a lot of kids wanted to do. So he didn't think he would be successful. So for him, it was really talking about the things that he didn't want. And I'm going to see if I can pull this up. So this is kind of where he started, because in his freshman year, as he was taking, and he, learned that he really liked to do those hands-on things. So he started out with woodworking, and then he went into metals and found that he really enjoyed metals. He then was asking those questions and found out there was an apprenticeship in the welding programs, but you couldn't get into that if you had poor grades. And he really struggled academically. So for him, that was a big piece of it, that he was like, well, if I can't get good grades, I'm not going to be able to get into an apprenticeship. So what's the point then in trying? So that's really what he didn't want. Making new friends was really overwhelming for him. And at times he really would feel lonely. So that was something he knew he didn't want to continue. He really wanted to learn how to build good relationships. He felt that when he started to struggle, he would really get discouraged, and then he would end up quitting and walking away. And that was a big barrier for him. He wanted to graduate from high school, but again, he was struggling with the grades piece of it. So he was afraid that if he continued to do poorly, that he would lose that motivation. And then as we were talking about, looking at with his family, what would that look like for him if he was to go into college? The idea of getting into debt to go into school, after high school was really overwhelming for him. And he was afraid to just move on, because the only people he had was this small circle around him. And he just couldn't see his circle getting bigger. And he couldn't see past what he had immediately in front of him. So from that, we talked about some of those past life experiences that pushed him towards what he viewed as not a great life. He said he struggled a lot in elementary school. He had a lot of behaviors. There were a lot of barriers that he faced in elementary school, and it was just something he couldn't get past. And he kind of had been bullied a lot because of that. And a lot of the kiddos still in school would push him to try and get those reactions out of him. So he really talked about how that really impacted his mindset about, building those relationships and having good relationships. He also talked about, as he moved into middle school, at times he would get really discouraged and want to give up, and he would give up, and then that would set him back. And then again, it would lead to some of those behaviors that he just really wanted to overcome. He had built skills to overcome them, and coping skills and how to handle those situations. But when he did get discouraged, it was hard to make those right choices for him. And then he talked about, as things got tough, he had a tendency to make poor choices, and that made things even more difficult for him. Some of the life experiences that we talked about that he wanted to avoid because it pushed him towards the things he didn't want, was making the right friendships. That he found that sometimes it was really difficult to navigate what was a healthy friendship, what was a good friendship, and what was somebody that just didn't make good life choices and wasn't an environment that he wanted to put himself in. And as he would struggle, he would end up, kind of getting into a little cave at home and playing video games, and he wouldn't go out and he wouldn't engage with friends or family. And so then he would just end up spending a lot doing the gaming and downloading, and it wasn't helping him in preparing or saving for his future. So through that, then it helped us lead to that vision of a good life. So for him, as we had that discussion, and as you can see, we didn't follow the form in one direction. We hopped around based on where those conversations led for him as a student, which was exciting because every time he would come back, he would have thought about that and was able then to kind of vision what he had for that good life. So for him, he would love to graduate and complete that apprenticeship program, because as he completed that, it would give him college credits once he graduated. And he really, as he had explored more about the apprenticeship program, that was exciting for him. And he really wanted to graduate high school and get accepted into Ranken Technical School and continue that career as a welder. He knew he needed to get a driver's license because if you were to do apprenticeship program, one of the requirements is that you had to be able to drive to the program after school was over, because you wouldn't be in school the full day. And he had those discussions about, well, if I wanted to go to Ranken, I think it would be best to stay at home while I do that so that I can save up for my first home, which was amazing conversations to be having. And to see the reaction of the family in that discussion was so exciting for him, because then it led to those discussions about him wanting to set up that retirement plan and prepare for his future, buy his own car. But he also recognized that for him and his mental health, that working out and being active really helped him stay positive. So then, as we talked about what he didn't want, he was able to develop what he saw as a good life. So then it talks about past life experiences that helped him achieve more positive outcomes. And he found that as he started working harder in high school, that he was getting better grades. And as he started to put things into an IEP to support some of those accommodations and modifications, it led to those discussions. And he was in those IEP meetings, then having those conversations with his teachers, asking for some of those things, leading the discussion himself, as opposed to just mom and dad coming in and saying, this is what we want for Owen. He started a savings account after having that discussion and thinking about where he wanted to be so that he could start saving up for that car and looking at, saving for his future. Having the discussion of, if I work in the summer and I start earning money and I'm building that, hard work experience, that's going to help me in those interview processes through the apprenticeship program. He joined a gym, but he also did boxing therapy. And he found that helped him really work through some of those behavior struggles that he was seeing himself at school. And it really helped him in having those conversations and being around individuals that were going through some of those similar experiences. So he started to develop that good group of friends. He was able to do that through the boxing therapy and really start opening up and having those conversations with peers. So he knew that some of that would help him for future life experiences, support him in that good life trajectory that he had, with support from family, continuing therapy, because he felt that he was seeing a positive outcome, and that was something that he really wanted to continue. He wanted to start taking part in community events, building those relationships, finding groups to take part in that welding world. And then volunteering, because he got so much out of boxing therapy, he realized that he wanted to pay that forward. He really wanted to do that and start volunteering there so that he could help other students that were struggling with anger and frustration kind of achieve some of those goals. So through all of this, just to see the growth in that student and those conversations that we were having, and opening up that communication between the parents and Owen themselves, we made a lot of progress just in that discussion through that trajectory of a life trajectory worksheet, which then leads into completing the integrated support star. And I'm going to zoom in on that because.
Can you speak briefly to the parental side of letting go a little bit so that somebody can take a risk and grow from it?
And that's a great question, Sharon. So the parents filled out the family perspective, and Owen filled out the person-centered perspective. And in that, as we came back together and they sat down and had some of those discussions, they really saw that Owen could achieve a lot of those things, that he had exciting goals and a plan for his future. and what they had been holding him back and trying to protect him from, they realized that he was much more involved in this. And it empowered them to give him those opportunities, that space to start utilizing that and developing that, because he himself was starting to go around school and having those conversations as they were completing the worksheet. So it was really allowing him those opportunities. And as an advocate and parent support partners, as we're supporting those families, it's a natural thing for a teenager to do. It's exciting to see somebody in high school starting to have those conversations. But any high school student would be doing that at that time, because we're thinking about that next step. We're having those conversations. So allowing them those opportunities to explore the different things that he talked about. Because when you're looking at the things that he didn't like, he understood what some of those barriers were. So it really helped that conversation and allowing them those opportunities to discuss, how do we give him more freedoms? How do we start to allow that? Because in those conversations, they had so many side conversations as well that really opened that door to building that trust between them. Him, seeing that they'll listen, but them also seeing that he was really taking this serious and he was really thinking about that, and really allowing him then those opportunities to kind of explore that further. So in the integrated support star, it really kind of helps. And again, there's one for the family perspective, and then there's person centered. So as Owen completed this and thought about, technical school and how do I apply for this? So he started in ninth grade, completing the trajectory of a good, the life trajectory. So where he wanted that good life to be. So as we came back and had those conversations, as he was making progress towards that, then it was, what is that next step for him? And for him, it was thinking about preparing for the technical school, the apprenticeship. He wasn't old enough yet. He wasn't there at that point. But we knew that if he was wanting to graduate and go on to Raiken Technical School, we had to start thinking about those things sooner so that we could address some of those things, because grades for him were a struggle in the beginning. How do we help Owen stay on track? So we first had that discussion about what are Owen's personal strengths and assets. He really found that he was really confident in advocating for himself. It made him more outgoing, and he had more of a willingness to learn because he started to find his voice, which is really exciting at that age. He wanted to succeed because he was seeing that as he was having those conversations with other adults outside of just his parents and really sharing his struggles and his personal story, it helped others open up to him as well. So all of a sudden, when he didn't feel like he had the skills to build friendships and build relationships, he found that as he was utilizing the tools and having those conversations, it was opening doors for relationships. He got his driver's license, so he had his own car all of a sudden because he'd been saving up since we had started having that conversation in ninth grade. And he completed 3 years of 3 years in the sense of he had 3 classes at this point. So he was able then to start preparing for the apprenticeship program. The relationships that would help him get into technical school, as he started applying, he realized that the relationships he had with his metals teachers were really important, and they were all willing to write those letters of reference to help him apply at technical school. He had friends that had graduated or were currently in the welding programs that could advocate for him and give him more insight and share those connections as well. His dad had a relationship in the unions and had attended school as well, so he was able to kind of make those connections outside of the community. And he had found a family friend that was in the field working, that if for some reason Owen wasn't able to get into the apprenticeship program, what could he do other than that? Because he didn't want to put everything in just hoping to get into that apprenticeship program. It was really looking at, if I can't get into that, what would some of those next steps be? And as he talked to and had those conversations with people in the field and he built those relationships, he knew what those next steps could look like if he couldn't get into the apprenticeship program, which, Sharon, kind of goes back to that dignity of risk. As we had those conversations, he was realizing that it wouldn't be the end of the world if I couldn't get into the apprenticeship program, but I could start building those relationships and looking outside of that. But he wouldn't have had those opportunities had he not started to find the confidence and pushing himself out there and having those conversations with people outside of just his comfort zone. Next, he looked at technology. What would he need in order to apply and get into technical school? So he knew that he could utilize his cell phone and his laptop to apply online. He could take classes online because he'd already looked into that. He joined groups in social media for welding and really started to build those connections. So he had more access to individuals. And he had started to develop from taking metals classes that knowledge of machines and programs. And he used that. He also went in the summertime to the community college and took a couple classes just on welding themselves, just like not classes that were accredited, but classes that he could take and start exploring that. When he looked at that community-based piece, again, it was reaching out to the union and having conversations, and then completing the apprenticeship program would help him if in utilizing those skills and going into technical school. Eligibility specific, that he knew he needed to complete those applications, complete a FAFSA workshop in order to know how to apply online for those different grants and loans. And he needed to complete the ACT in order to get into that. So he started to look into what would I need, what accommodations and modifications can I utilize from my IEP in taking those tests and assessments, because that was scary for him. So it allowed and opened up that door to have some of those discussions. From there, we also looked at the mapping family roles. So it was really looking at then, what can some of those look like? Who are currently in Owen's life that can help him or do help and support him now? Thinking about looking ahead, what would that look like? Who are additional individuals that I can reach out to? And then what are some of the importance to know and to make sure continue to happen so that he continues to find fulfillment in life? So in caring about, it was really that affection and self-esteem. He knew that he got that from his immediate family, but he also knew that his aunts and uncles and his grandfather could also support him if something was to happen. If he didn't have that connections, that he could continue to build those relationships and have that. Because he really enjoyed spending that time with his loved ones. Those relationships were important to him. So he felt it was important to make the time for those relationships. When he's looking at that knowledge piece, who else knows things that others don't know well, as far as like celebrating, when you're looking at traditions and habits and history. He knew that his parents and his best friend and his sister had a lot of that knowledge. Going forward, he knew that he could look to, and he started to build relationships with people so that they had a knowledge of those special experiences and memories. It was really starting to share himself and open that up to have those discussions. So it wasn't just that immediate family. He was really starting to build those relationships with people, because he really had that need to feel connected and have those relationships. So in looking at sharing more about himself, he was able then to build those relationships. When you look at that lifetime bond, who he knew he had that with his immediate family, but then he really started to look at, well, as I graduate, what will that look like? The friends that maybe I build in high school, I won't necessarily have all the time. So who can I learn to really start investing more in? And that would be there if I need that. Because he found that he really enjoyed being involved in others' lives and contributing to them as well. When he looked at who was currently providing that day-to-day care, he knew that his parents really took part in that daily living and healthcare. So he had an aunt that was in the nursing field. So he really wanted to start reaching out to her and having those conversations, as well as if mom and dad aren't available, when I start going into those doctor's appointments and so I start doing those things on my own, who could I call to assist me or come to those appointments as well if I'm feeling overwhelmed? And he also knew that his sister was always available too. That was the note he made on that piece, but it was really starting to think about who could support him through that. When you're looking at this, and because he was still in high school, really kind of considering those financial needs, he made sure that, to make sure that his needs were met. He knew mom and dad were always there, but he also had his grandparents that, was always a phone call away that he could reach out to and really ask those questions. He also knew that his aunt, that he had a close relationship and had developed even more as he was in high school, that he could reach out to them for support as well. So it's really just starting to have those conversations so that he didn't feel overwhelmed as he thought about that next stage. What are some of those conversations that we're really having to open that up so he recognizes, one, what he has around him, but then how he has started to develop those as we've moved through these tools. So for him, he found it very eye-opening to realize that he had more relationships in his life than he really had thought about in the beginning. And then this tool was the one that I think really helped him find that progress. This is something that he was moving into his, I would say this was his junior year, the beginning of his junior year. So this was really breaking down what he felt was important and not necessarily as important. So he knew where to focus first. So as we would go into those IEP meetings and have those discussions, he was able to really articulate, these are priorities now. These are things that I really want to start addressing and looking at and getting supports for, because I know that these are my immediate needs. So as we had those discussions and really looking at first that daily life and employment, he wanted to go to technical school full time. So he wanted to earn his certifications in welding as close to graduating as possible. He wanted to continue the apprenticeship and earn an income while he attended school. So for him, it was really important to explore that and know what all of his options were as he got into that, because he did get into the welding apprenticeship program and knew that that next step for him was technical school. He wanted to live with his parents while saving so that he could purchase his first house, but he knew because he could still live with mom and dad, that wasn't a high priority. At that time, that wasn't a goal he wanted to focus on as much as making sure that, you know, he was prepared for going into a technical school. For him, those relationships were really important. So he joined a sand volleyball team. He started taking part in a paddleboard club, and really tried to get together more and spend time with his friends so that he would continue that outside of school, because for him, relationships were so important. And he was starting to develop really amazing and healthy relationships. So he really wanted to continue that momentum. Next, we had that discussion about healthy living. He wanted to continue to work out. He wanted to make a checklist for what doctor's appointments he needed, understanding the chiropractic appointments, therapy, psychiatrist appointments, because he had a lot involved and he knew it was important, but it wasn't for him the most important thing. But it was something that we as a team knew then as we sat down and talked about that we would navigate that, because as he became more independent, how could he keep all of that together? And for him, it was an app that he utilized to put a lot of those in so that he would have those reminders and it would prepare him for making those appointments and having those discussions. And he had an app that saved all of the important information that would be asked in those appointments. Next was really looking at and learning how to use online banking, because that's where his paychecks went. So we made sure that he understood, you know, navigating those finance pieces of it and having skills. He took some classes in high school in order to better understand that. He wanted to continue volunteering because of the impact it had had on him. He also, you know, starting to grocery shop and, you know, develop those, learning how to pay bills and manage his incomes. But for him, it wasn't as big a priority as some of the others. But it was good for him to have those discussions with his parents so that they really understood that these were things that we could still work on, but it wasn't something that was for him that immediate need. Next was really understanding that he really enjoyed that time as a family, which was a great discussion that he had, and really looking at how do we talk through some of those challenges and things that come up so that he knew that he had that resource to reach out to, and really put that effort into checking in with them and starting to do more activities so that it would continue for him as he graduates. And then learning to invest. For him, that was a big concern because he wanted to be able to pay for college. He didn't want to graduate with loans and things outstanding, so that he could, you know, purchase that house and make, you know, live independently. So for him, it was really important to kind of find those and take some of those in community college as well. So I've gone through a lot of workshops and shared a lot of information. So are there questions that anybody has at this moment?
One of the questions that could apply to the mapping or the STAR was asking about what kind of suggestions you have to find peer mentors post high school, especially if you're not going to go to college. And I think that's a question for all young people, not just people with disabilities.
I would say it's really finding community activities that are happening. You can reach out to the libraries, they'll have a lot of resources. You can look through social media to see what activities are coming up. But that's what I've found in supporting families is that big piece of it. What are some of the things that they're passionate about? And then looking at what groups are available. So like for him, with example, with the paddle boarding, but there's therapy through, the boxing therapy and having those youth groups that currently, meet together. And you can find a lot of that through the library. It's amazing how much information they do have, but then reaching out to those community resources to see what activities they have coming up as well, so they can start connecting to those. Because a lot of those resources, like even through family advocacy, a lot of our parent support partners have those lists of what those different activities are so that those teenagers can be involved in that, because it is important. And that's such a vital piece in order for them to continue to be active and, explore more and build that independence.
I would also just add that this mapping tool is a nice way to open the door to maybe not a peer, but an older adult mentor, an uncle that really wants to support the driving, or an aunt that's really interested in the career choices that will sit down and talk about some of the implications. And sometimes I think it's hard for families to start that conversation with extended families. So really great opportunities with all these tools.
Yes, because that's a big piece of it, really, Sharon, as you've shared, is really starting to look outside of just what you provide, but having those conversations and opening those doors for more discussion to see who wants to be involved and who wants to participate in that further. So it was actually a great tool that they took and utilized with their extended family to have those conversations and sit down and kind of discuss those. Because they're tough topics to kind of discuss sometimes and really think about. So normally we would break out into small groups and kind of do that. But what I will do is, as I'm sending you this PDF, I can send the worksheets out that we've gone through so you can see those and utilize those. But there's also resources at the end of this that shows that will take you to the tools that we've explored today. And it will also connect you to the Life Course Nexus, which is where they house all of these tools. And it gives you so much more information as well that you can kind of explore. There's a lot of great videos that they have there that you can access as well.
I just want to add too, before we break up, that both Mandy's organization FACT and our organization can support you one-on-one to get started with some of these tools.
Absolutely. As you think about these, whether you're supporting a family, if it's your own child, really, how can we adapt these tools for different students' needs? And so again, on Life Course Nexus, which I have on the next page where I've got this information here, they really do a great job of showing you examples of these tools utilized based on different students' needs. So in the case with Owen, it was a clear path that we had utilized over 4 years. So it was very specific, but sometimes you're not coming in at that beginning. You're not having those discussions at the beginning of their high school career. And sometimes you're coming in at the middle or towards the end. So it's really then, how do we utilize these tools to have those immediate conversations, but then start having those conversations about how do we adapt this and really pull out what some of those modifications and accommodations can be utilized to support this and explore those conversations further.
It's a lot of information.
It
So,
really
like I
is.
said, go back, look at the information, pick one tool, one area that you want to just dabble, and don't make yourself crazy. If you need support, let Mandy know, let me know. We're
Yeah.
here for you.
Yeah, I will include my email information to be shared. Please reach out if you have questions. And again, like I said, this wasn't done over one sitting. This was done over multiple years. So this was continuing to come back and utilizing tools. So this was not something that was done short term, all these forms at one time. These are really discussions that took place over 4 years. And none of these forms were filled out in one setting. It was kind of having those discussions, starting to open that up so that they had time. For Owen, it was that time to process that information, really think about that. So he didn't feel overwhelmed with all of that, because it can be a lot. But I really appreciate this opportunity. And I'm happy to answer any questions if you have something after the fact, after you reviewed the information.